Welcome to the Choose Your Own Finance podcast, a podcast by two expats for expats. I'm Blair,
And I'm Kun.
and we're going to be talking about the news today. What's in the news, Tune?
Well, I thought we'll talk about my favourite subject of all,
The
weather. Well, the weather definitely made headline news in the UAE in the past week. On Monday, we had massive thunderstorms and heavy rainfall to much of the UAE, and that caused huge amount of flooding, hailstorm damage, and a lot of mess for people to clean up.
We sat on the porch in the morning and ate our breakfast with the wind and the rain coming sideways and the lightning. It was like a show for us.
It did definitely put on quite a bit of a show.
Yeah.
The amount of lightning that occurred as well. I guess the lucky news is that it was well predicted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the government was able to warn people ahead of time.
Schools were closed.
School were closed.
People
from home.
working from home.
Yep, and the government put out an edict the night before that all government employees should work at home for the day, which luckily saved everyone too, because the road was mostly empty, and unfortunately I had to get to work and I was still late.
Oh no!
Because there's so much flooding everywhere too. So all the main, even the main highways in low parts was flooded, so cars had to go very carefully, and I think they did close quite a few roads and rerouted a lot of people as well.
And the storm seemed to hit at a very busy time, around 7, 8 a.m.
Yes.
was when the storm was going really strong.
Yeah, no, definitely. So some of the heavy storms started just after midnight in some areas, and continued on, as you mentioned, around sunrise, the heaviest parts for Abu Dhabi, and then in the afternoon it really hit a lane with all the hail.
Oh man!
And the flash flooding.
I saw pieces of hail that were like the size of plums.
That's
right?
very rare for the UAE to have something like that
Yeah.
too. And I think many people, unfortunately, who parked the cars outside suffered a lot of damage.
I saw a lot of damaged cars.
Yes. A lot of
Yeah.
insurance claims, I think will be put in over the next few weeks as well.
Yeah.
But I guess it does go to show that the weather can be quite unpredictable at times.
Yes.
Just like the stock market.
Ah, right. And looking outside today, it's sunny, right?
Yeah, and you wouldn't know that it was all the rainfall and all the thunderstorm and how it just occurred a few days ago.
There are still a few puddles, but for most part, life has just moved on.
Yes, and which is very similar to the stock market, where you'll get the odd crash now and then, but it always marches forwards and upwards, which is why we tell people to always invest in the stock market, stay invested, and when things go haywire, to stick your head down, don't panic, and keep going.
Because recovery does come, right?
It does.
I mean, there may be an inconvenience in the short term.
Yeah.
Like certainly school being canceled is inconvenient for parents. And the hail damage in Al Ain is quite extensive. Some people had water intrusions in their houses. But this is why we have an emergency fund.
Yeah, and exactly, and it really illustrates the value of the emergency fund. Because we never know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and where it's going to happen as well. Too, because it's flooding on how this week, next week it could be dust storm or it could be something else.
Or heat wave.
Yeah, heat
hopefully
wave.
not.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
And I guess we never certain what's going to come and when, but we do know that it will come one day, and the best we can do is just be prepared for it.
Right.
I guess, and emergency fund is a really critical component of our financial plan. And if you don't have one, I do recommend you to consider one. And Blair, what should people have in their emergency fund?
There needs to be enough money to cover an emergency. So it depends on what's going on in your life. If you own property, you need to have money to cover the damages to that property. If you own a car, you need to be able to replace your windshield if you live in Al Ain, or two, the front and the back. And you need to have money to make sure that an emergency like this, whether it's with the weather or the stock market, doesn't frighten you. So for some people, they're going to need more in their emergency fund to give them peace of mind. And for some people, they might need a little bit less because they might have a little bit less stress around money. If you don't own a lot of property, you probably don't need as much in your emergency fund unless you have a lot of people depending on your income, in which case you might want a bit more. So the standard advice is around 6 months. I would say some people prefer 12 months of their expenses in an emergency fund. Some people prefer less. My husband and I keep around 3 months. We don't own any property other than our old car, parked in the basement, thankfully. And that 3 months of expenses is enough for us to cover any emergency that we would run into. But it really just depends on your circumstances, where you might fall on that. What about you, Toon? What do you keep for your emergency fund?
Yeah, so I keep between your one and about 6 months. So I keep about 4 to 5 months worth of emergency funds,
Yeah.
which I figured it's good enough to last me through anything from unemployment to the car breaking down or someone getting sick. So I guess the peace of mind is really invaluable because it allows me to think clearly rather than panicking and getting stressed over where the money's going to come from. And yeah, it helps me make better decisions. So any emergency that occurs, I don't exacerbate the problem by making more rash decisions that compounds the mistakes.
If you own a property, the house that you live in, or a rental property, you probably need more than what Toon and I have, because we don't have to cover any property damage were that to happen, and we don't have to cover a mortgage where we could lose our incomes. So that gives us a bit more flexibility to be on the lower side. Just putting that out there in case you happen to have a property, you might want to consider keeping a little bit more on hand than what we have.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the emergency fund will help you get through any short-term potential problems in the future.
And just like you don't sell your car because the windshield's cracked, you also don't sell your portfolio when the value drops, right? We just hold on to it and then wait for the sun to come out, because it always does. If you're fully invested in a low-cost index fund that tracks the entire market, you're not overly invested into one stock or one sector or one country. If you have that diversification, then you really don't need to worry. The sun will come out.
So, our advice: remain invested and have an emergency fund.
Yep, that's how you get through the weather, the stock market weather.
And until next time, have a good day.
Thanks for joining the Choose Your Own Finance podcast.